On a desolate battlefield that is populated with mean faces, for some reason hero faces off against the demon lord who mocks him. The demon lord is charging up a purple attack. The hero recognizes this and picks up the rock that will be his last resort. The demon spell creates a huge rock in the sky, and it heads towards the hero. But high school physics being what you are, the smaller rock wins the speed battle and pushes the bigger rock back and destroys it for good. The hero is tired of all the cheap tricks the demon has pulled and is ready to end this fight. With a sweeping attack, the demon agrees to end it quickly and they both engage in battle. The demon rushes forward with his demonic power and the hero does the same with his golden dragon power spam. The two clash several times the second and they seemingly uniform. The battle rages on, and the ground beneath their feet crumbles under their collision as the dust settles. The demon lord looks the worse for wear with his breathless and torn clothes. The two stagger towards each other, stabbing each other right in the chest without a care for their own lives, and when the last bits of life escape the hero's body, he is simply glad that his battle is over and he can finally rest. After some time, the students are seen going to school in the morning, and one boy with a very specific haircut is very excited to be there. He can't wait to make friends and live a normal life like a normal person. My normal students who are stretched out in the halls like hello, it's a very normal day, in which other students find it strange, but they don't want to directly interfere so they don't say anything about it, but it's hard for them to keep their distance when he walks in to directly introduce himself to them as Blade. The guys introduce themselves as Chasm and Clay, and the girls are Jessica and Claire. Blade friends emphatically announces that he's here to get one, and asks if Claire wants it. Blade agrees to be friends with them and is very happy that he already has 4 friends. He is now trying to make 10,100 friends at school, when their conversation is interrupted by a red-haired girl, reprimands them for rioting. In the middle of the school halls, the girl burned hard. She took the first place in the school, and therefore among the student body you can not only walk, but someone was given the title of emperor. But the Blade did not care much about the titles. He stood up in his face and introduces himself. But Ernest is curious as to why he hasn't seen him here before, revealing that he's actually a transfer student who just arrived at the school, but Ernest doesn't believe it. The famous Rosewood Academy only accepts students who aim to become a hero of justice. Such a late emission. Blade says that he has no intention of becoming a hero, and hearing Ernest's anger, he just wants to make friends here, and yells at him for having such a weak decision. But Blade resents it and asks him to take him to the principal's office because he should have already been there. Ernest and Blade arrive at the giant door of the principal's office and he announces them. They are told to enter and Ernest immediately bows when he sees the man in front of them. But once again Blade doesn't care and just walks forward. Ernest tries to stop him and asks him if he really isn't know who is sitting in front of them, but the knife knows that it is the king. He just doesn't care. He tries to apologize for his rudeness, but the king is not offended in the slightest. He praises Ernest record and says that starting today he will be the new headmaster of the academy. Overhearing this, Ernest begins to express his happiness that the king himself is being instructed. While the knife stands there, having enough of the king stroking his ego, observes what happened and tells him to shut up and get out of his office, but in a more polite way. The king only wants to talk to the knife, and now Ernest is angry that he's getting all the attention from the king, and Stomps asks the knife why he did it to the king. To go and do it because Ernest must hate him now. The king says he's here to help rehabilitate him as a hero and make some changes to the curriculum to help him regain his strength, but Blade doesn't want that at all. He wants to be a normal person now, but the king doesn't want to let him become normal. He wants him to regain his strength. Even though the demon lord is dead, the Blade will return to the training grounds later runs, where a group of students are working on their training. He sees Ernest's strengths and she asks him what he's doing here because it's an advanced class, and Knife says that when he took the test for the lower class they told him to come here, but he doesn't buy it, and when he shows his target to prove this, then he thinks he must have bribed someone to get into the advanced class, or at least tricked him into the academy, because the academy never accepts someone who doesn't want to be a hero. Doesn't accept. But once again he wants to be friends with 100 people, so he starts asking everyone on the training ground to be his friend. While Ernest is still talking, he tells him upset that he's not paying attention. He says he'll listen to her when he's there, talking, but then he puts his hand on her head and tells her that he's still listening to her. She's embarrassed by this and draws her sword to strike at him, but he dodges the blade and the lamp goes out. Cheeb hit the wall. He was surprised that he avoided the strike, but before he could say anything, another student came up and told them that the teacher had asked all the students to collect knives. Missing the opportunity to be friends in order not to lose, he introduced himself to the girl and asks her name, but she doesn't answer at first. Ernest says how the girl doesn't like talking to people, but after Blade's influence, she tells him her name is Sophie. Ernest is a little G before the Blade actually manages to get her angry to talk. He asks the teacher to let him test Blade's ability in class. He tells Blade to cut through a set of enchanted armor with his sword, which any advanced student can do, if the knife can't. He then proves that he cheated to get into the school and he has to leave. Doesn't seem too nervous and only asks him what his power level is for a higher class, and when he says above 3 levels normally he activates his second sword technique. He absolutely atomizes the armor and some of Ernest's clothes, and everyone takes some damage from the power of the Blade attack, and Ernest asks who he is, but he still says later that he's just a normal guy. Lunch Knife sits at Ernest's table and invites his other friends to sit at the table, but they refuse the invitation. Ernest says they don't want to sit here because they are afraid of him, but Knife wants to know what they are. Terrified by it, he takes a bite of the food and is immediately surprised by how delicious it tastes. Ernest apologized to her for what he said earlier because he thought she cheated on him when he gained the power to enter the academy by itself, but the Knife had already forgotten all about it, so he says that he does not worry about it. He proves that he is his friend, but he is surprised that he considers him his friend. He is ashamed, but finally happy to have a friend. That evening, Ernest was still in his room glad to finally have a friend. Suddenly a sword on the wall made a sound, and he remembered his childhood, seeing the sword that he told him to surrender, and sure enough, it was a cursed leg. Grabbed the stained sword and then his hair turned red. The next day Ernest is training with the other students with that damn sword. He is fighting Lancer. He activates his lance but it just hits him and he loses, but then the curse starts and he wants to split this guy's sword. Open-minded, but manages to stop himself at the last minute. He summons another challenger and Sophie steps into the fray. They strike across the field, but then Ernest jumps into the air and launches a flamethrower, causing Sophie to dodge the next stab forces. But the Knife is afraid to fight Ernest, but he is not well, but he insists that he is fine, but when he raises his sword again he falls to the ground and is caught by the Knife and then takes him to the hospital. But the doctor says there's nothing he can do for him. The doctor can cure any injury or illness. Even if you're on the brink of death, he can bring you back. But curses are beyond his expertise. Ernest wakes up and says, "Rides. Where is he?" And the Knife tells him that he is unconscious and he brought him here. Then he tries to get up and asks if he has committed any murders. The Knife makes him unconscious and it's too hard to lift Ernest. Despite this, he convinces her, then tries to leave, but the doctor tells him to go back to the bedroom and rest. He tells the doctor that if anything happens, he will look after Ernest, so he should be allowed to leave, and the doctor allows it late. As soon as he sees the other students, he becomes more concerned about his image and tells her that he can walk on his own. The Knife makes him rely on him a little more, but even though they are friends, Ernest as his help Knife doesn't want to get it. Sneaking into the academy headquarters to find out more about Ernest's sword, he discovers that it is a demon sword, and the next day he allows the boy to put the cursed demon sword away. Private, and she thinks he's trying to scare her into taking first place, but the Knife doesn't care. When he really cares for her she accepts it, and when he asks her to take out the knife then told him he knew it. The story behind his sword. Later they meet at the top of a building and the Blade asks how he got the demon sword and he says that he accidentally touched the sword when he was young and then the sword tried to take it to wreak havoc, but he has managed to fight his urges until now. Lei tells him there is a way out of this and he knows, but it's dangerous because if he does, the demon will come alive, but the Knife convinces him. If the demon is born, he cuts it. Ernest agrees to fulfill the contract and summons the demon. It appears in the dark space with a huge demon and it almost takes over his body, but the Blade is to control it. Yes and thank you. He is able to fight and defeat the demon, in a dark and stormy night and in a very dilapidated castle. The echoes of the battle can now be heard through the halls.